Thank you so much. Just confirming you're seeing just the intro slide, or do you see the kind of the back end slides?
Just the intro slide.
Perfect. Then we're looking good. Um, Everything that Laura and Andrea just gave in this amazing introduction, I 100% agree with. And to even take the microphone for a few minutes, I'm like, keep going. Everything that they're saying and the book talks. Um, this will continue to be a bit of a fire hose. So please, where do you can screenshot any of these slides, as well as as Laura and Andrea mentioned, email for additional resources. So I'm going to dive in, just confirming that you saw the slide change, hopefully.
Yep.
Great. So just to kind of give a little bit, to stop and pause of looking at the children's publishing overall. If you're not already familiar with the CCBC, they've been tracking a range of indicators and a type of content featured in children's books over the past 30, probably like 25 going on 30 years. There has been a steady progress made in diversity representation around race and ethnicity. They're now also tracking LGBT and maybe a few other categories, but it is still woefully underrepresenting in terms of the diversity and intersectionality of our students. But I wanted to throw these up here to get a sense to help remind, what the state of children's publishing is and the reality of what our educators and our school librarians are facing when they go into classrooms. You're not crazy to be, it's hard to find diverse books, contemporary books, let alone something focused on immigration. And then when we think about how this reflects of our current US population and how now the majority of our students in K-12 do identify as BIPOC. And then if we were to add in an additional element around immigration, finding those books is a real challenge, and how we can use librarians to support that. One of our favorite poems that we love to share to really open a lot of our discussions around this is featured in the book Amazing Faces by Jane Medina, the poem Me Times Two. I will read the English. I read times two, I write times two, I think, I dream, I cry times two, I laugh times two, I'm right times two, I sing, I ask, I try times two. I do twice as much as most people do, because most speak one, but I speak two. I love this poem. I think this poem really captures not only the editorial mission that Lee and Low Books has, but so much of what Laura and Andrea are saying here, that when you go and pick books to put into your program or to recommend to a colleague or to put into the hands of a parent, we are trying to make that our curriculum, our learning spaces through books, a welcoming space. This little girl sees her biculturalism, her biliteracy, her bilingualism as an asset. How can we make all of our students across all parts of their identities feel like an asset, feel welcome in the classroom, including immigration, if that is a part of their family story, and how students are looking to see what is being signaled or not signaled on what they can bring to the classrooms. Here at Lee and Low Books, we have really worked to kind of cultivate what we mean by a culturally diverse library. First and foremost, definitely in terms of thinking about the varying demographics and social identity markers and the intersectionality we want represented in our students. But, to really hammer home what Laura and Andrea are saying are, every book that they were featuring are books that are transformative. These are texts that are going to engage students. They're the best of the best. They're award-winning. They're accurate. They are, dispelling stereotypes and misrepresentations. And so that is going to be a critical piece, just because you might have the social identity markers or some of the demographics, making sure that it is still a high quality book. When we're building that library, right, we don't want any one book to represent an entire group of people or one immigration journey or experience. So showing our students that we're going to put as many books around across reading levels, genres and formats. Where does, for example, immigration show up in poetry versus in nonfiction versus in drama, or graphic novels? I'm really trying to play to the areas of students' interest in there too. And then making sure that, as Laura and Andrea had also mentioned, who are your students? You are doing the work on knowing your families, you're doing school and home visits, you're doing parent-teacher conferences, you're having office hours, you're looking at student writing examples. You know what excites your students, what is going to be relevant to them, to their peers, and to the community that you're working in. This of all the slides, I would say this is my favorite in terms of how to audit the books that you have. It is not something where we hope that you go back and you have to do 500 books to really determine the quality of them. But if you were to get into the practice of doing it for a couple books, or to also bring in students as young as third grade into the process of helping you examine the books that are in your curriculum or in your classroom libraries, as well as with parents, you're setting them up in a way to always be thinking about how we approach book. Is this the best book to be using in this program, in this unit? The NYU has a great tool both in English and Spanish around looking at the culture responsive and accuracy and representation of a whole curriculum, whether you are looking at a school curriculum they made or something that's off the shelf or from a major curriculum developer. There are several. Lee and Low has an English and a Spanish edition of how to examine a collection of books. This is intended for classroom libraries, not public libraries. That is a totally different ballgame. But for teachers to think about either their classroom library or a core read aloud set that they have. And then there's several tools now available of examining an individual book in terms of how its accuracy, the social justice elements that are connected, and standards, as well as representation, both from the Learning for Justice, Achieve the Core, and then I love to also call out the Smithsonian's American Indian Museum created one specifically around how to examine Native American children's literature. So these are great tools to get a look of when you're pulling this off the shelf, to think about, is this the book that we want to be using? And then if not, you've got some ammo or additional information to bring to your administration to be like, we need to change this, and this is why. I really wanted to reinforce, what Laura and Andrea were speaking fully to in terms of, where immigration or any other element that you're going to be talking about with your students around demographics and intersectionality is going to show up in your library. You're going to have books where you want to maybe show how we are all universally connected in terms of our similarities and differences. We all go to lunch, we all go to school around the world, and be able to show that piece. But then there's going to be times where you are going to want to not to center an aspect of culture, whether that's celebrating a heritage, culture, and identity front and center. And then there can be times where you have a more universal book, the Just Our stories, kids being kids, where it's everyday topics. The protagonists will come from diverse backgrounds, but that's not a main feature or center of the story. And then the piece too of getting into history, showing, for example, immigration and migration at different stages across the United States history and global history. How can we show the triumph contributions of communities of color, as well as immigrants, and the complexity of oppression, racism, and discrimination, those together? But to not stop there, making sure that we're also in this next leg showing books about joy, centering a child's experiences and their community's experience, their family's experiences around joy. So that really helping, give a more robust, diverse library and picture for students. Just going to jump ahead here in terms of, I really want to hammer home to, particularly around immigration, but looking at that when we're building that collection, it's so critical to think about how we have a diversity of experiences within a culture community. So just for example, here in terms of, Latinx experiences in the United States, a range of stories of making sure that we're showing students, from living in Harlem, Houston, Miami, you're going to have very different communities represented, different cityscapes, rural landscapes, and then different time periods too. The book Still Dreaming, this is coming out this fall. It's the first picture book to explore and discuss Mexican repatriation that happened in the 1930s and 40s, which is a very little known piece of history for many students, as well as some adults as well, in terms of US history around immigration. And so that is something that we are excited to bring forward. But it's definitely talking about when we think about changing the narratives of how immigration is taught, when we think about how which groups are being excluded and presented as immigrants, who is being either has historically been excluded or misrepresented, and how we can change those narratives. Here too, in terms of thinking, even with the looking at of where immigration can show up in your book collections, how all books can lend themselves as both windows and mirrors, in the sense of, your students may not connect specifically with a culture or an ethnicity represented, but maybe they do connect with the religion or the family structure or the geographic location. So finding ways, again, leaning into your expertise on your students and their interests and their communities that they're living in, their neighborhoods, that you can really pull those different aspects and make and find the pieces that they do connect with, as well as to learn about others in their own classroom as well as around the world. I want to, in the next few minutes, just to give a few examples of what we're seeing communities around the country doing in terms of really exciting students and families and showing, the environment around literacy of what just the potential that books can do. One of my favorites is the story walk that happened in Maine a few years ago, where a public library and school partnered with a farmer's market. They selected our book, Rainbow Stew, which tells the story of this African-American family who it's a rainy day, so their outdoor plans get ruined, but the grandfather has this idea of like, let's go into the garden, we'll pick vegetables and we'll make a vegetable stew. And when we think about with our students, when this specific community picked this book, thinking about, hey, this is an opportunity to take the books out of the classroom to really reinforce the library, the farmer's market, your parents are all teachers, are all invested in our children's literacy. And they set up a story walk where they could go through the book. And when they ended the story, they were in the farmer's market. And so if you want to reinforce vocabulary acquisition, you want to reinforce, background schema, for students to see a zucchini, to see blackberries and have that connected to them, to have that whole literacy space is really powerful. Out in New York, one of the elementary schools in the Bronx had a beautiful bilingual Book of the Month program that they partnered with, the principal partnered with the Parent Teacher Association at the school, where they would select a book to feature that all the families would read. And they had these displays when you walked into the building that they would fill out as the year went by. So if you went in May or June, you could see all of these displays of the books that they had read, the activities they had built around it. This close up, the middle image shows the family, some parents had rebuilt the setting of this book, My Very Own Room, and through Legos, right? Like you can't force that level of excitement and engagement when parents are getting to see books that they connect with as well as the students, and then how that is infectious and contagious, for students to see that excitement that the parents are having alongside their teachers. Out in California, an elementary school selected the book Finding the Music, which features a little girl learning about her grandfather and his connection through the mariachi and his impact on the community. They selected this book and invited the author to come and do a reading, but they also invited the middle school mariachi band. And what was so powerful about this example is not only did the school know that this was a book that their kids were going to be excited about, but to have, the professional official author on the same stage as the middle school mariachi band, many of the kids had their brothers or sisters are up there, really, elevating and recognizing, right? Really centering, what the community cares about, what activities people are participating in, what the values are, and just how tremendous for kids to see that, to have their siblings sharing the stage of a professional author. One more example to share too, in terms of this teacher, Miss Kerr. She's a middle school teacher out in North Carolina, and she selected the book. She worked with the book Some of the Mariposas, which is a modern day retelling of the Odyssey, of a journey of 5 sisters through Mexico. And she did during hybrid COVID learning, she still partnered with schools in Mexico to study both butterfly migration, which is a big central motif in the book, talk about how migration and immigration is not only a universal experience to humans, but it is a experience of all living things, right? Many species migrate. It is something that one should ever feel shame about, and to really take pride in. Of this is something to connect us, and finding a way to take what her students are experiencing and seeing, and to also really change where it belongs in the curriculum. If I can leave you with a few things before we switch to the Q&A, that link at the top from the American Library Association, that and your public librarian is your best friend in terms of, do not feel that you need to go and search for every book on your own. We just talked about very much how it is brutal out there to try to find the books that you're needing. And there's 35 to 5,000 books of children's books alone being published every year. Use the librarians, these awards, as a starting place. They are doing the work. As Laura and Andrea said, they will, the librarians will call out the publishers to go back and do better, change the misrepresentation, change that stereotype, or pull that book off the shelves. And so these are a great way to help you identify books that you need for your students, and that you may have struggled to find before. A few other websites I want to call out. ALA has a rainbow list around LGBTQ. Colorado is fantastic for English language learners. Please take a screenshot. And then again, find a community to keep thinking about children's books. There's some amazing blogs by parents, librarians, and educators. Sometimes those can feel like very separate groups, but the groups are, people are coming together. We are not in a silo to really talk about the best of children's literature and nonfiction and how you can find that. Between whether you're Pinterest or on Instagram, there's some great, books in terms of, if you have colleagues who are like, I must always use this book, no one's coming for chrysanthemum, but there's a way to maybe add on the elements that they love about that to pair more human-centered, culture responsive books that students so need. We had the opportunity recently with Reimagining Migration to take a look at their immigration framework, their learning arc, and we got to go through our own books and place them along that framework. And it was a really fascinating opportunity to see where in our own stories, what stages of immigration and migration are being represented currently in children's literature, and what gaps that we have, as well as to think about then where does this overlay with the curriculum that you're using. I'm going to end with a final story of, we have a program where we want to encourage new authors of color in children's publishing. And one of the books that came through the pipeline of many years ago was It Just Happened. It was a biography about Bill Traylor, who's a self-taught artist. This was a story that our staff had not known about, a piece of history in terms of, he's a former enslaved person and sharecropper in Alabama. His art went on to be discovered and seen around the world. And this story was picked up, this book was picked up by the nonprofit Reading is Fundamental and distributed to schools around the country, including in Alabama, where it turned out his great grandson, Justin, discovered that book and had that book used in his school. And when we heard about that story, it really blew us away in terms of thinking that not only did Justin get to see his family story, an author chose his family story to talk about, but his classmates got to see that story. And we think about how that story, that experience needs to be felt by so many kids here in the United States and around the world.